Let's begin by understanding where inflammation comes from. If you or your patients are dealing with inflammation, it's incredibly unlikely that you woke up one morning and suddenly, poof, symptoms. Chances are it was a slow build-up over years, something very gradual, which you or they may not have noticed this gradual decline in your health. This is how inflammation in chronic disease works. It's very gradual. In fact, studies show that there can be elevated blood markers showing signs of inflammation years before the symptoms arise. So fortunately for us, there are ways we can interrupt this process at any point along the path. Now, this path from healthy to unhealthy can be seen as something like a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, there's the pinnacle of health, and on the other end of the spectrum, there's disease. Now, we're all on this continuum somewhere. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, most people tend to be closer towards the disease end than they are to the pinnacle of health end. An interesting note is that everything you do moves you either up or down on this spectrum. Everything you are exposed to from one end of your life to the other, every stress you go through, every bit of food you eat, all contribute to your state of health and wellness. Now, there's a word for this, and it's called exposome. An exposome is defined as the measure of all exposures of an individual in their lifetime and how those exposures relate to health. It's an individual's exposures from beginning of life to the end, and all insults from environmental to occupational. So as more research is being done, we see that everything from how long you hold your cell phone beside your head, to the soil your food is grown in, to how much stress you deal with alters your exposome, which alters your position on the spectrum of health. So when it comes to factors in the exposome that alters one's position, your diet has one of the biggest effects of all. You are what you eat, after all. Now, things start to get a little bit confusing here. You may know somebody or have a family member who can eat and do whatever they want. They can sleep odd hours, they can drink, and they really never have an issue. And then there's somebody else, for example, who tends to have a lot of health issues if they drink so much as a single glass of milk, feeling terrible. So what determines your place on this spectrum of health is not only your exposome, but also your individual proclivities, your epigenetic characteristics. Epigenetic characteristics are basically your genetic constitution. Maybe you don't produce enough of a certain type of enzyme, or perhaps you store metabolic byproducts, or maybe you can't metabolize caffeine efficiently. These characteristics are written into your genes. They're part of what makes you, you. So this is part of the problem with the diet industry. Someone changes their diet, for example, and it works great for them. They feel great, and they think because it worked for them, it's going to work for everyone. So they write a book, or publish a blog, or create a YouTube channel, or make a course. And this is also the reason why most diets fail. They do not take into consideration each person's unique constitution. This concept of epigenetics and exposome work together to create bio-individuality. Whenever we are exposed to an environmental trigger, and remember, these triggers are different for everyone and determined by our genetics and our epigenetics, as well as our exposome, your immune system is activated to protect us from what it sees as danger. The terms we use for these dangers are allergens or antigens. This process is happening all the time in a healthy system, and we never really notice it. If there is enough of a trigger, then you might start to notice symptoms like bloating or headaches, maybe brain fog, muscle soreness, stuffy nose, things like this. This is a sign your immune system is doing what it should. If your system is exposed more regularly or to increasing amounts of these environmental triggers, eventually your immune system must up the ante. And at a certain level of exposure, the adaptive immune system kicks in. This is when things start to go bad. If you recall from anatomy and physiology, the body is made up of small things that come together to create big things. Atoms form molecules, molecules form cells, cells form tissues, tissues form organs, organs form systems, and systems form the body. Inflammation causes damage at the molecular and cellular level. When enough cells get damaged, we start to see tissue damage. When we have enough tissue damage, we start to see organ damage. Once there is organ damage, we start to see symptoms. So you see, it's not until quite far down the line of damage that we begin to feel the problem. I will say this often throughout the course. Symptoms are not the start of the problem. They're the last straw. It's a sign that your body is already overwhelmed. But perhaps we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Let's take a step back and look at how all of this can begin.